Would you stay till the morning light, or would you follow me?
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kayla, and if you're not new, thanks for coming back. Always happy to have you. Today I'm super excited to do a different kind of bookish video with you guys and just share some of my bookish thoughts with you guys. This video is actually dedicated to my sister Ari because it was her idea. She texted me one day and she said, hey, you should do a video sharing your like top 10 books of all time on your channel. And I said, Ari, that is not a bad idea. So here we are. Thanks, Ari. This one's for you. I feel like my blue light glasses are distracting, so we're gonna do that for now. So today I'm sharing my top 10 books of all time. These are my favorite books that I've read across my life. And I thought at first that this video would be really, really hard to film, and that it would be hard to come up with just 10, or like I didn't know if I could think of 10 books that I really, really enjoyed that I would say are my favorites. But once I took a couple minutes and like thought through some like things that I've read or things that I enjoyed while I was in school, and books that I've read since like starting my YouTube channel, going through my Goodreads, I came up with this list in about 5 minutes. If I was stranded on an island and could only bring 10 books to be my lifetime library, these 10 would be it. So without further ado, let's get into those top 10 favorite books. Go grab yourself something to drink so we can talk about some books. I'm drinking a lemon water and a coffee glass because hydration. Also, if you know your top 10 favorite books or like an absolute favorite book that you have, leave it in the comments. I want to see what people would say are their favorite book, or are some of their favorites. These are also in no particular order. They're not ranked, but maybe at the end I will say what I would say is my top favorite book of all time. I just have to think on it for a minute before I actually say that. But let's dive on in. I have it written down on this little notepad. Let's do it. First up that I wrote down on the list, I don't know why this came to me like right away when I started thinking about my top 10 favorite books, but it is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. I don't even know if it counts as a book because it's technically a play, but I guess it does count as a book. But I love Macbeth. That is my favorite Shakespeare play. It was the first one I ever read. In 8th grade we had to read Macbeth, and for me it was like such a proud moment to like read and make it through a Shakespearean novel. And it wasn't like an adapted version. Like I read Shakespearean English Macbeth. I also just love the story. The Three Witches, I think it's one of Shakespeare's best plays. So Macbeth is up there. One of my bigger regrets in life, I don't want to say it's the biggest, but when I studied abroad in Oxford, a performance of Macbeth was happening at the Oxfordshire Castle, and I had tickets, but it was raining, so I didn't go even though they performed Rain or Shine, and I think about that a lot. But Macbeth is my favorite Shakespeare. It was a big step for me as like a lover of literature and as a future English major to read Shakespeare for the first time and understand it and appreciate it for what it was. This is another more like academic book, or one that I read in school, and it is Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. This book is a little bit different than what I typically read. It's a memoir, and it's based off of Frank McCourt's life. He grew up in Ireland, very poor, and his father was an alcoholic and stuff, and it talked about how his father's alcoholism kind of destroyed his family, and it's a very like raw, very honest account of his life, and it's very sad. It's not like a happy book by any means. I'll never forget reading it and just being very like enraptured by reading about his experience living in Ireland, living in a very poor part of Ireland, and he had a lot of like interesting experiences, even though they were really sad to read about. Minor, but I read it in my AP Lit class, and I absolutely loved that teacher and that class. It was one of my favorite English classes I've ever taken. That was a real moment reading Angela's Ashes for me, that I like felt myself and recognized myself learning. There's a moment in Angela's Ashes where one of Frank's siblings has just died as an infant, and the way he wrote about it was the first time I really understood color symbolism. His dad had gone to get the coffin for the baby, and it was a small white coffin, but on his way home his dad stopped for a Guinness at a bar, and the contrast between like the dark of the beer and the like baby's white coffin, like I had never understood like the power of color symbolism like that before, so that was a really powerful moment for me. Furthermore, the dad puts the Guinness on the baby's coffin and it leaves like a white ring on the coffin, and it's just a metaphor for how Frank McCourt's father's alcoholism impacted their family. And I'll never forget reading that book and understanding that moment and coming to that realization. This book is a recent reread and a recent review on my channel, so if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. But A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas is one of my favorite fantasy books. I eat that series up. I just think that that world, and I listed A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I really think it's just the whole series. Like those 3 books, I could literally live in that fantasy world forever. I think it's so well done. The first 2 are loosely based on fairy tales, which I love a good retelling, and that book series got me out of a really long reading slump when I was graduating high school. I probably hadn't read a book in about 3 years, but then I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and like never stopped reading after that. This book is a really recent read that got added to my favorites list. And what's weird is it's not even the first book in the series, it's the second one that made my top 10 list. It is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the sequel to The Kingdom of the Cursed. I don't know why, but the second book just sucked me in. Like I devoured that book, like learning about the different circles of hell and the way that she brings them to life was so cool to me. I just love that book. I think it's such a cool concept. The like 7 deadly sins, the 7 princes of hell is just a really cool concept, and I think she does it so well. The world building and like her writing, the way she describes Italy is just to die for. Like it's just so cool, and it's all wrapped in like a fantasy murder mystery. As I was filming, Ari just called me to hang out and chat. So this is the 5th one, we're halfway there. This one is another more academic one. I don't know why so many of these came up for me, but this was for my time studying abroad in Oxford. It's like kind of cool to see the progression of like favorite books from the different like periods of my education, like middle school, high school, college. So in Oxford, I took a Oxford Fantasists course, which was all about fantasy writers that attended Oxford universities, and one that we read was Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I'd read this book before, and I really loved analyzing Alice in Wonderland and realizing how much he had put into such a nonsensical seeming book. Like there is so much that went into Alice in Wonderland and so many layers and angles you can approach that story from, and it's still an enjoyable children's story. Still this like fun, whimsical, nonsensical book, but there is also so many different angles and approaches you could take to analyzing it as a text of literature. Children's literature is literature and can be analyzed and seen in an academic context. I feel like I never felt that, or like felt that that was seen. Like I always appreciated children's and middle grade and young adult literature, but like to actually see it as appreciated as real literature was great for me. And I remember I read it and I had enough historical context of like Renaissance England to understand references to the War of the Roses that were in that story, and I wrote a whole paper on the War of the Roses in Alice in Wonderland, and it was just the coolest. This book is again another retelling of a classic story. I really love retelling. They're not everybody's cups of tea, but some people are purists, but I truly love retellings. I love taking unique twists and adapting a story that exists, that is loved, and creating a whole nother story that is also loved and empowering and very cool. This one is The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. I had never read like King Arthur, the Legends of King Arthur before reading The Guinevere Deception, Kiersten White is an all-star writer. Her descriptions, her writing style, her language, her world building is so beautiful and so well done. She's like, if I can write half as good as her one day, like, I'm doing something right. I've actually reviewed the Camelot Betrayal and the Guinevere Deception here on my channel, so I'll link those down below. The Guinevere Deception was so well done. I actually have all 3 of the books and I haven't read the last one because I am truly not ready for that series to die and to be done. And but I am really excited that I get to reread all of them in order to get there. And it made me want to read King Arthur. It inspired me to read King Arthur, which I did, and I ended up teaching a whole unit with my 7th graders on King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and that was a really cool moment for me as well because these kids took such an old text and they loved it. That was like my most engaging unit. It's the last unit I taught with my kids and they loved learning about King Arthur and Camelot and all of those things, which was really great to see, and it was a really proud moment for them. They took a complicated, difficult text and they understood it. So that was super powerful for me as a reader, a literary person, and a teacher. It was just a really, it's all because of Kiersten White. Side note, one of her other retellings, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, I read with my book club and was so good. Next on this list, this book is so good, but it will a little bit destroy you, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Again, another kind of retelling or loose interpretation of the myth of Achilles and Patroclus. Again, I've said this before, I think in my books TikTok made me read video. I knew how that story ended, and I got to the end of the book and I like prayed that it was not how it ended, and the ending of that myth is the same, and it destroyed me. It is so beautiful, the way that she writes, the way she paces it. We spend so much time growing up with Achilles and Patroclus, and she just really dives into that ancient world. You feel like you've stepped back in time, and she tells this story and she takes this spin on it where like you're watching them fall in love, and then you get to the end and you're just like gutted. You're just like, I was sobbing when I was reading it. I was on the way home from my sister's bachelorette in Charleston, and I read like 3/4 of it on the plane ride home, and then I went home, I laid in my bed, and I did not move until I finished that book. Just sobbed, and it was so beautiful and lovely, and that is one of those books that I wish I could go back and reread for the first time. This book is another YA that actually like I really appreciate and is one of my favorites because not only is the story really good, but it opened doors for me as a reader. This was my first like mystery thriller that I actually really enjoyed and loved, and it made me want to read more mysteries and thrillers, and that is truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, which is a 4-book series that follows this girl as she's at boarding school, and she is trying to solve a murder that happened in the 1920s while there are simultaneously more murders in the present day at her school. It's one of those stories that's really complex, that you can tell it took so much thoughtful planning for things to turn out the way that they did, that it's just so impressive to me. And it's such a like fast moving story. You feel like you're solving the mystery along with the main character and her friends. It's so good. It takes place in Vermont. Like the setting is beautiful. This like cool like dark academia boarding school has such a cool energy, and it was the first time I read a mystery and I was like, I actually want to solve this. Like I want all of the books now. I want to know what happens, and I can usually read those books in under a day because they move so quickly. They suck you in, you learn things like little details, and you just want to keep going to put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. I don't know how this slipped my mind, but I was like trying to like see if I represented all of the genres that I read, and I realized I didn't have like a realistic fiction, really romance book on here, and that is something that I enjoyed reading. This is Along for the Ride by Sarah Dessen. Along for the Ride is my favorite Sarah Dessen book of all time. Oh my god, I read that book every single summer, And for me, it just feels like quintessential summer. Truthfully, I don't really know how it's much different than other Sarah Dessen books. Like some of her other books deal with like more clear themes like eating disorders or like domestic violence, things like that. Something about Along for the Ride, like I can't even identify what it is about Along for the Ride that just like makes me so happy, but it's like one of those books that I'm like, this is the summer romance that I wish that I had had in high school, and it's just so nostalgic for me. I read it when I was in high school, and then since like starting booktube, I've read it pretty much every year since then. Actually, since Sarah Dessen came to the bookstore where I worked, I've read it every summer, and that's probably been like 4 years now. But I just love Along for the Ride. It is such like a wholesome, sweet romance. Like it's so wholesome. It is like all of the scenes and interactions between Auden and Eli are just so cute and like so sweet, and like the idea of them being up all night together and just like two kind of lonely insomniacs coming together is, I don't know, just really, really cute. It also reminds me of Serious Moonlight by Jen Bennett. I did watch the movie and I didn't hate the movie. It wasn't as good as the book because it never is, but I did actually really like the movie. And lastly, this one, I was like, I thought about this video for a couple of days. I was like, what would be on my list? And every other day that I thought about it, this book came to my brain. And then when I actually sat down to write the list, I almost completely forgot about it, but Ari is calling. We will get to the last one in just a second. Ari, this video really is for you, sister. But last but not least, my last of my 10 favorite books of all time. Are you ready? I truly don't think I would be the reader that I am today if it wasn't for this series, but specifically for this book, and that is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. It is the best Harry Potter book of the series. There's no question. If you think otherwise, you are simply incorrect. Number 4 is superior. I read that series when I was a kid. I was probably, I think I was in like going into middle school, or I was in elementary school going into middle school. And at the time, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire was the longest book that I ever read. And I remember being so proud of myself, but also it is the best one, and I have definitive reasons why. Despite Harold's hair, okay, which was awful, we all know, we can agree, we can concur, that is the real turning point in the series, where you're still kind of split between that fun, happy, whimsical, enchanting, magical feel of the first 3 books, but you also get that like really real, gripping, like what's at stake, serious themes that you find in the last 3 books. That's a good split point between the first 3 and the last 3, and I find that it really combines the best of both worlds. You have the enchanting, magical concept of these wizarding games. There's dragons, there's like these semi-mermaid creatures, right? There are these challenges, a maze, and then there's also this really like serious, looming, like grave theme on the other end of it, where the Dark Lord comes back. Voldy comes back at the end of that book. So it just really brings what feels like 2 almost disparate series together really, really well. And you get the happy, fun magic, and you also get like the serious, compelling parts of the book. Thus it is the best. If I had to pick my favorite of all of these books, I might honestly say Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I love Harry Potter. I know that Miss Rowling is a problematic person, but that series still has so much magic and nostalgia and like sentimental meaning to me. Despite all of that, I still love the series, and I'm happy I read it, and I love to reread it and things like that. That I think if I could only read that one for the rest of my life, and I knew the magic, and I had that magic with me for the rest of my life, I think I would be okay. But that is all I have. Those are my top 10 books of all time that I've read so far. Maybe in a couple years we'll do an update video, but like I said, leave me your favorite books or your #1 favorite book in the comments so I can see what else I need to be reading. Unless you're going to be contentious about it, also put your favorite Harry Potter book, even though the 4th one's the correct answer. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe and stick around if you did, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
Would you stay till the morning light, or would you follow me?